It was Xuan-Yuan Sword VII's release in 2021 that finally brought it and its sister series, Sword and Fairy, to my attention. Despite some issues, it proved one of my favourite RPGs of 2021, featuring a rich, beautiful world, great characters, a fantastic story, and really fun action RPG gameplay. We scored the original release a 9, and, suffice to say, I've been hooked on the series ever since. When a Nintendo Switch port of the game was announced, I was immediately intrigued and warily excited. Would the developers be able to successfully port this Unreal Engine title to the Switch, a machine notorious for not handling the engine well, and what, if anything, would be lost in the technical translation? Now, after a long wait, I finally had the chance to see if the Switch port did justice to this epic Chinese action RPG. Set during the late Western Han Dynasty, Xuan-Yuan Sword VII throws you into an epic tale focused on blending Chinese mythology with history. You take on the role of a hunter, Tashi Zhao, whose only concern is looking after his sister while flying low beneath the radar of the powers that be. But when a monster attack puts his sister's life in jeopardy, Tashi is forced to leave his home and seek the help of the gods to restore his sister's soul to her body. Now, I've used the word epic to describe the game several times, because it is. The game gives us a glimpse of China mild in mythology, history, and the supernatural, with some grand locations that Western audiences will only know from period pieces and wuxia martial arts movies, albeit without all of the aerial combat. The combat, next to the story, is one of the game's major assets. It's fast, fluid, and fun, making use of multiple fighting styles and companions who assist in combat. Tashi unlocks multiple martial arts styles through the campaign that are designed to complement his basic sword attacks. Regardless of whether you're using empty hand strikes or powered up sword swings, the combat is fluid enough to switch between them with ease in the heat of battle. You can also block attacks and parry too, but be aware these actions root you in place when it's often preferable to stay mobile. Combat feels very hack and slash orientated, with multiple enemies to focus on at a time, so you have to pay attention to multiple incoming attacks while managing a stamina bar. Staggering enemies is a key feature, allowing you to perform one-hit kills on smaller enemies and deal massive damage to bosses. Your party members attack of their own accord, but also have special attacks that you can trigger. The classic RPG mechanics are relatively traditional and streamlined. You equip accessories to buff stats, use workshops to craft new weapons and accessories, while monster souls are collected to further augment your abilities. With the basics out the way, the biggest question is how has this translated over to the Nintendo Switch? In most ways, the Switch port manages to capture the spirit of its bigger console brothers perfectly. The story is still wonderful, the fully voiced dialogue and music is excellent and accounted for, and, surprisingly, the combat remains fast and fluid most of the time. But, and unfortunately there is a but, this comes with a price. The original version of the game came with performance caveats that have translated over to the Switch. But the Switch version also brings its own issues to the table, with one significant rendering technique that may make or break the game for you. As with the original version, there are some wonky animations at times paired with strange mesh distortions. These are often seen with cloth animation, which seems to resolve at a lower frame rate. As a result, it looks stuttery during combat and movement, and cloth textures stretch during some of the game's Uncharted-style platforming sequences. As you might expect, there are low-resolution assets for models and textures, most notably in the environment, and specifically on the game's foliage. The environments show off the low-res assets most prominently, especially in outdoor areas. Thankfully, character and monster models hold up quite well, looking great in close-ups and during the excellent cinematics. Unfortunately, the game also doesn't have a stable frame rate, but it really drops low enough to actually be a problem. There were a few stutters during exploration and one or two locations that saw large drops, but for the most part it seems to stay relatively stable. Kudos to the developers for keeping the frame rate in combat sequences stable and fast, preserving the game's fluidity and speed during key moments. All of this brings me to the technique that will either make or break this for you. DRS, Dynamic Resolution Scaling, is at play here, and it is very aggressive in this port, leaving almost no frame untouched, and resulting in notably fluctuating resolution. At times, especially while exploring interiors, the game looks great. However, in more demanding and complex natural environments with enemies and NPCs, there is a massive resolution drop that can leave the image looking smeared and blurry. In some areas, the drop is low enough that you can have trouble distinguishing elements on screen, most significantly enemies from the background. Technical gripes aside, I had actually forgotten just how much I loved Xuan-Yuan Sword VII until I started replaying it on the Nintendo Switch. The story, the combat, the setting, and exploration still kept me engaged, despite having gone through it on the PS4 before. Does the Switch version have issues we've come to expect from Unreal ports? Certainly, but they're more disappointing than game-breaking. And yes, even the wildly fluctuating resolution couldn't stop me from enjoying it. That said, it does make scoring the game harder, because it is a hefty visual issue that might put off some players, especially those that may be playing it on the big screen. At the end of the day, I'd argue this is still a great RPG that fans of the genre should play. You just have to decide whether portability or presentation is more important to you.
If you've got this far, please consider giving the video a like and maybe subscribing to our channel, as it helps us grow.